The crisp winter air filled my lungs as I stepped onto my porch, expecting to be greeted by the comforting sight of my neatly stacked firewood. Instead, my stomach twisted into a knot. The spot where my firewood had been just last night was now completely empty. Not a single log remained. I rubbed my eyes, wondering if I had somehow miscalculated how much I had left. But no, just yesterday I had spent an hour stacking it carefully, ensuring it was dry and ready for the season. Someone had taken it, and not just a few pieces. My entire supply had vanished. Annoyance turned into suspicion. Who would do something like this? A desperate neighbor? Some mischievous kids? Maybe a wild animal had scattered it. But no, that didn't make sense. Determined to get answers, I stormed inside and pulled up the footage from my security camera. If some bold raccoon had suddenly developed a taste for firewood, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. What I saw on the screen was far worse. There she was, Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA. The woman who made it her mission to control every aspect of the neighborhood, from the color of our mailboxes to the number of Christmas lights we were allowed to hang. She wasn't even trying to be sneaky. Wearing her ever-present smug expression, she strutted up to my firewood pile in broad daylight, hands on her hips like she was surveying her kingdom. She barked orders at two clueless movers she had apparently hired for her latest power trip. With a grand wave of her hand, she gestured for them to load every last piece of my firewood into the back of a pickup truck. She didn't hesitate, she didn't look around in guilt or uncertainty, she simply took it. A mix of disbelief and fury settled into my bones. She hadn't left a note. No explanation, no warning, just her entitled assumption that my firewood somehow belonged to her. And I already knew what her excuse would be. She'd claim it was some kind of HOA violation, that my firewood wasn't aesthetically pleasing enough for her ridiculous standards. Or maybe she'd say it was a fire hazard, even though plenty of other people in the neighborhood had the exact same setup. But none of that mattered. Karen made the rules, and Karen decided when to break them. Fueled by righteous anger, I stormed down the street straight to her house. As expected, her place looked like some kind of HOA headquarters. Immaculate flower beds, an oversized American flag display, and a pristine white mailbox that probably got polished daily. I barely had to knock before the door swung open. There she stood, arms crossed, looking mildly annoyed, like she had been expecting my visit and considered it an inconvenience. "Oh, Jake, good morning," she said in that fake customer service voice she always used. "What a surprise, what can I do for you?" I didn't even bother with pleasantries. "You can start by explaining why you stole my firewood." Karen scoffed, feigning innocence. "Stole? Jake, that's a rather strong word, don't you think? I merely repurposed it for the good of the community." I narrowed my eyes. "Repurposed it? Karen, that was my firewood. I paid for it, I stacked it, and now it's gone." She tilted her head, giving me a patronizing smile. "Jake, you know as well as I do that the HOA has certain standards. Your firewood pile was, frankly, unsightly. It didn't match the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. I was doing you a favor by removing it." I clenched my fists. "Karen, it was in my backyard. No one could even see it." She waved a dismissive hand. "That's not the point. The HOA's annual bonfire is coming up, and we needed extra firewood. Your pile was the closest and most convenient." I let out a humorless laugh. "So you're telling me you just helped yourself to my firewood because it was convenient for you?" Karen sighed, already bored with the conversation. "Oh, Jake, it's just firewood. I don't see why you're making such a fuss. You can always get more." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Karen had a way of making people feel like they were the unreasonable ones, like their perfectly justified anger was some kind of overreaction. But I wasn't going to let her gaslight me. "Fine," I said, stepping back. "Enjoy my firewood, Karen, but just know you've made a huge mistake." She laughed, shaking her head. "Oh, Jake, you're always so dramatic. It's just firewood." I turned and walked away, my mind already working. Karen had been running this neighborhood like her personal kingdom for years, bullying people into following her arbitrary rules. But this time, she had messed with the wrong person. She had taken from me, Asterisk not asterisk out of need, but out of entitlement. She assumed there would be no consequences. That was her biggest mistake. Because now, I was going to show her exactly what happens when you steal from the wrong guy. I stormed back home, my mind buzzing with anger and something else, something sharper, colder. A plan was already forming in the back of my mind. Karen had taken my firewood, believing herself untouchable, immune to consequences. She thought she could get away with anything simply because she wore the HOA president badge like a crown. But she had made one fatal mistake. She had underestimated me. I wasn't the kind of guy to just roll over and take it. No, if Karen wanted to play games, then I was more than happy to play along. The difference was, I intended to win. I went straight to my garage, my hands moving on autopilot as I rummaged through my supplies. I knew exactly what I needed: hollowed-out logs, a little bit of patience, and the perfect secret weapon. A slow grin spread across my face as I pulled out a small, tightly sealed container. I lifted the lid just enough to peek inside, and immediately a swarm of tiny, angry creatures stirred. Fire ants. Tiny, relentless, and with a sting that felt like 1,000 tiny needles stabbing into your skin. Karen had taken my firewood. Now I was going to give her some more, logs that looked just like the ones she had stolen, except these ones came with a nasty little surprise. I spent hours carefully preparing them. I found logs that matched the ones she had taken, then hollowed them out just enough to create hidden chambers. I made small entry points so the ants could crawl inside and nest. Once the logs were placed in a fire, the heat would drive the ants out in a frenzied panic, sending them swarming in every direction. By the time I was done, I had several firewood pieces that looked completely normal, but in reality, they were ticking time bombs of pure chaos. I stacked them neatly in a pile near the side of my garage, making it look as though I had simply replaced my stolen supply. Karen was predictable, too predictable. I knew she'd come back. She had taken the first pile without hesitation, and now that she had gotten away with it once, she would have no reason to stop herself from doing it again. And when she did, I would be ready. The next morning, I barely had to wait. Just as I was finishing my coffee, I glanced out the window and saw her. Karen stood at the edge of my yard, hands on her hips, her eyes locked onto my neatly stacked logs. She didn't even hesitate. With the same entitled audacity as before, she marched over, waving for her hired movers to follow. Like clockwork, I stayed inside, watching from the window as they loaded the logs into the back of a pickup truck. Karen supervised the entire process, barking orders like some kind of deranged queen directing her subjects. She was probably telling herself she was doing the neighborhood a favor, doing me a favor. She had no idea that this time, I was the one doing her a favor. This time, I was helping her. Helping her learn a lesson she would never forget. They drove off, and I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee with a satisfied smirk. Now, all I had to do was wait. That evening, the entire neighborhood gathered for the annual HOA bonfire event. I strolled over casually, blending into the crowd, acting like I had no idea that my stolen firewood was about to become the highlight of the night. The event was just as pretentious as I expected. Karen stood at the center of it all, basking in the attention like a queen addressing her court. She held a microphone in one hand, her voice ringing through the park as she boasted about her dedication to the community. "This bonfire," she declared dramatically, "is a symbol of our togetherness. A reminder of the sacrifices I make to ensure this neighborhood remains the very best it can be." I nearly choked on my cider. Sacrifices. She stole my firewood, and now she was acting like she personally chopped down a tree to provide for the neighborhood. Unreal. She went on, soaking up admiration, completely unaware that her moment of triumph was about to become her moment of humiliation. The fire pit crackled with warmth as people gathered around, sipping hot cider and chatting. And then, right on cue, Karen made a show of picking up the first log, the very firewood she had stolen. She held it above her head like it was some kind of ceremonial offering. "Let the fire bring us together," she announced dramatically before tossing it into the flames. The crowd clapped politely. The log caught fire quickly, and for a few seconds everything was normal. The wood burned, the flames flickered, and Karen stood with her hands on her hips, proud as ever. Then the ants woke up. At first, it was just a few tiny creatures crawling out of the log, disoriented by the sudden heat. But within seconds, it was an asterisk absolute swarm. Dozens turned to hundreds asterisk, then to thousands. The fire pit exploded into chaos as ants poured out in every direction, fleeing the flames in pure survival mode. The first scream came from Karen herself. She shrieked, slapping wildly at her arms as ants crawled up her sleeves, down her back, and into her hair. People near the fire began jumping back, swatting at their legs as the frenzied swarm spread. A man toppled over his chair. Someone else spilled their hot cider all over themselves. Karen, being the closest to the fire, got the worst of it. The ants were asterisk everywhere. Her shrieks turned into full-blown screams as she spun in circles, trying desperately to shake them off. She tripped over the refreshments table, knocking over a massive bowl of cider, which drenched her from head to toe just as the ants really started to bite. The panic spread like wildfire. People scrambled to get away, chairs and tables flipping over in the madness. Someone knocked over a tray of marshmallows, and to my utter delight, a few of them ended up sticking to Karen's now cider-soaked clothes. The ants, drawn to the sugary mess, doubled their attack. Karen flailed, her shrieks echoing through the park. "It's a fire hazard! It's bioterrorism!" she howled, swatting at her arms while the entire neighborhood watched in horror and barely contained amusement. The HOA Vice President Barbara finally spoke up. "Somebody help her," she shouted. But nobody was brave enough to go near her. Karen, realizing she was on her own, made a split-second decision. She ran asterisk. Screaming like a banshee, she bolted past the crowd, through the park, and straight toward the lake at the edge of the event space. With an unceremonious splash asterisk, she threw herself into the water. A hush fell over the crowd. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then slowly, the first chuckle started. Then another's. And another's. Within seconds, the entire gathering erupted into laughter. Even Barbara, still clutching her clipboard, was doubled over, tears streaming down her face. Karen emerged from the lake seconds later, gasping and flailing, her hair plastered to her face in dripping wet clumps. She looked like some kind of drowned, sugar-coated sea monster. She stomped toward her car, soaking wet, covered in marshmallow, and humiliated beyond belief. She didn't even try to make a speech. She didn't try to regain control of the night. She just got in her car, slammed the door, and drove off into the darkness, leaving behind a bonfire event that the neighborhood would talk about for asterisk years. I stood near the back, sipping my cider, enjoying every second of it. Karen had finally faced the consequences of her entitlement. And the best part, she had done it to herself asterisk. By the next morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing with whispers about the bonfire disaster, as people were already calling it. It had only been a few hours, but the story was spreading like wildfire, much like the ants had. Text messages flew between neighbors. Social media posts hinted at a catastrophic HOA failure. And of course, the most common sight that morning was groups of people standing outside, huddled together, laughing, reenacting Karen's frantic sprint into the lake. Every version of the story got a little more ridiculous. Someone claimed Karen had screamed so loudly that every dog within a 5-mile radius started barking. Another swore she had swallowed a marshmallow whole while flailing and nearly choked. By lunchtime, someone had exaggerated the event into asterisk, the night Karen fought off an army of mutant insects. I didn't need to add anything. I just sat on my porch, sipping coffee, watching the legend grow. But Karen was nowhere to be seen. Her house, which was usually the nerve center of her self-important operations, was completely silent. No morning HOA emails. No passive-aggressive notes about trash cans left out too long. No prying eyes scanning the neighborhood for minor infractions. It was eerie, like the queen had abandoned her throne. I figured she was licking her wounds, trying to come up with an excuse, something that could spin the story in her favor. Karen never admitted defeat. She was probably plotting her next move, looking for a way to convince everyone that she was the real victim. And I was right. By the afternoon, her first attempt at damage control arrived in the form of an email. The subject line: Urgent HOA meeting, attendance mandatory. The wording was as dramatic as ever, filled with phrases like gross misconduct, serious safety violations, and threats to neighborhood stability. Translation: Karen wasn't just mad, she was furious. She was going to try and turn this around, probably frame herself as the poor, helpless president who had been sabotaged by some reckless individual. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. That evening, the HOA meeting. The community center was packed. Word had spread fast, and by the time I walked in, every seat was taken. People were crammed against the walls, murmuring among themselves, barely containing their amusement. A few turned toward me, smirking. They knew. Oh, they knew. And judging by their expressions, they weren't about to let Karen get away with whatever nonsense she was about to pull. Karen sat at the front of the room, looking far less composed than usual. Gone was her usual air of smug superiority. Her hair, which was normally styled to perfection, was still a little frizzy from its unfortunate dip in the lake. Her expression was tight with frustration. She was trying to look in control, but she had already lost it. She cleared her throat, gripping a printed statement in her hands. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice a little too sharp, a little too forced. "We have a very serious issue to address today. Last night's bonfire event was a disaster, a disgrace to our community, and it was all due to a deliberate act of vandalism." A few muffled chuckles rippled through the room. Karen ignored them. "Someone," she continued, scanning the crowd, her eyes lingering on me a second too long, "intentionally tampered with the firewood, putting hazardous, insect-infested logs into the pile. This act of recklessness caused chaos, injuries, and reputational damage to the HOA. It was an attack on our very way of life." She paused, expecting gasps of horror, outrage, maybe even an outcry demanding punishment. Instead, there was silence. A few people exchanged glances. Someone snickered. Karen's jaw tightened. And then Barbara, the HOA vice president, finally spoke up. "Karen," she said slowly, her tone measured, "before we start throwing around accusations, maybe we should discuss the real issue here." Karen blinked. "What do you mean?" Barbara leaned forward, clasping her hands together. "Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you take that firewood from Jake's property without his permission?" A murmur swept through the crowd. Karen's face twitched. She started, then forced out a laugh. "Oh, please. It was for the benefit of the community. His firewood was in violation of aesthetic standards." Barbara raised an eyebrow. "You mean the same aesthetic standards that don't actually exist in the HOA guidelines?" Karen stiffened. Her carefully constructed argument crumbled in real time. "I was acting in the best interest." This time, it was Barbara who interrupted. It was Mr. Thompson, one of the longest-standing residents in the neighborhood. "Karen, you stole that man's firewood," he said, his gruff voice cutting through the room. "Then you threw it into the bonfire in front of the whole neighborhood, and now you're mad because it backfired on you? Sounds like karma to me." Laughter erupted, louder this time. Karen's face flushed deep red. Her grip on control was slipping by the second. For years, she had bullied people into following her arbitrary rules, twisted HOA policies to suit her needs, and treated herself like royalty. But now, Now the spell was broken. People weren't afraid of her anymore. They were mocking her. And she knew it. Barbara didn't waste another second. She stood up, straightening her blazer. "I move to have a vote," she said, loud and clear. "A vote to remove Karen from her position as HOA president." The room went silent. Karen's mouth dropped open. "You can't be serious," she sputtered, standing so fast her chair nearly toppled over. "I have dedicated years to this community. I have made sacrifices." "Yeah," someone called from the back, "like stealing firewood." Another voice chimed in, "And ruining the bonfire." "You fine people for having garden gnomes," someone else shouted. "You wrote me up for leaving my porch light on too late," a woman added. "You banned lemonade stands." That was the final straw. The room erupted. People were laughing, shaking their heads, calling for the vote to happen immediately. Karen was losing them. Barbara, barely containing her smile, raised a hand. All in favor of removing Karen from her position. Hands shot up across the room. More than half. More than enough. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She turned to the crowd, desperate, trying to salvage the last shred of control. "You're making a mistake," she cried. "You need me, this community needs me." But nobody was listening. The vote had been cast. It was over. Karen let out an inhuman noise, a mixture of frustration and disbelief, and stormed out of the community center. The moment the doors slammed shut behind her, the room erupted into cheers. Karen's reign of terror was officially over. That night the neighborhood felt different. For the first time in years, people weren't walking on eggshells, afraid of stepping out of line and receiving one of Karen's infamous HOA violation notices. The air was lighter, filled with laughter and hushed conversations about what had just happened. Karen was gone. Her reign of terror, her iron grip on the HOA, her relentless, power-hungry meddling, it was all over asterisk. And the best part, she had done it to herself I sat on my porch with a fresh pile of legally owned firewood stacked beside me. The crisp air carried the faint smell of burnt marshmallows from the bonfire, now nothing more than embers and a hilarious memory. A few neighbors stopped by throughout the night, drinks in hand, still grinning from ear to ear. "Did you see her face when the vote happened?" laughed Tom, my next-door neighbor. "I thought she was gonna explode," his wife, Lisa, added, shaking her head. "She really thought people were going to back her up after everything she's done." "I gotta say," said Barbara, the new acting HOA president, stepping up onto my porch, "I do officially know how those fire ants ended up in the bonfire, but..." She smirked and raised her cup in my direction. I clinked my cider against hers, playing innocent. "Crazy how nature works, huh?" The group chuckled, and we spent the next hour reminiscing about all the ridiculous things Karen had enforced over the years. Like the time she fined a man for having a red front door because it was too aggressive. Or the time she tried to ban inflatable holiday decorations because they didn't fit the upscale aesthetic of the neighborhood. Or, of course, the infamous lemonade stand incident, when she shut down a group of kids trying to make a few bucks on a hot summer day because their business wasn't HOA approved. Everyone had a story. Everyone had a reason to celebrate. The HOA had finally been freed from its tyrant. And me. I could finally enjoy my firewood in peace. I tossed another log into the fire, watching the flames flicker and dance, a sense of satisfaction settling deep in my chest. But just as I was about to take another sip of cider, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. A new email. From Karen *. My smirk grew wider as I opened it. The subject line: You haven't heard the last of me. I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. Of course, Karen wasn't going to go down quietly asterisk. And somehow, I had a feeling the real fun was just getting started. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the email. You haven't heard the last of me. Of course. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat. She wasn't going to slink off into obscurity, quietly licking her wounds. No, she was going to fight, to plot, to try and claw her way back into power. I sighed and opened the email. Jake, I hope you're proud of yourself. I have been unjustly removed from my rightful position as HOA president due to a childish prank and a group of ungrateful residents who do not appreciate the work I have done for this community. But let me make one thing perfectly clear. This is not over. The HOA needs leadership, structure, and discipline. Without me, this neighborhood will fall into chaos, and when it does, don't come crawling back to me. Enjoy your little victory while you can. Because when I return, and I will return, things will be very different. Consider this your only warning. Karen. I read it twice, then laughed out loud. She really thought she could make a comeback after everything that had just happened. I wasn't worried. Karen thrived on control, but she had lost it. The neighborhood had turned against her. She had no power left, just empty threats and a wounded ego. Still, I had to admit the idea of her trying to make a comeback was entertaining. A few days passed and Karen remained mostly silent. No emails, no sightings. It was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. But then strange things started happening. First, Tom found a violation notice taped to his door, except it wasn't from the HOA. The letter had no official stamp, no signature from Barbara, the new president. It simply read, "Your lawn is exactly 1.5 inches taller than regulation height. This is unacceptable. You have 24 hours to correct this or face consequences." Tom naturally ignored it. The next day, his front yard was TP'd asterisk. Then Lisa received a similar notice about her mailbox being misaligned with the street's aesthetic. She laughed it off until someone egged her car overnight. And then my turn came. A folded letter slipped under my front door. I opened it, half expecting another fake violation. Instead, there were only 2 words. I'm watching. I narrowed my eyes. So this was Karen's big plan, petty vandalism and scare tactics. I almost felt insulted. Karen had always been a menace, but this was just pathetic. I had half a mind to ignore it, to let her dig her own grave, getting caught sneaking around like some bitter high schooler. But then I thought about what she really wanted. Control. Fear. She wanted people to think she still had power, that she was still in charge. And I wasn't about to let that happen. If Karen wanted a war, I was more than happy to give her one. But this time, I was going to end it once and for all.